All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Picking a wife. How to recognize quality, degeneracy, reject crazier ones, and training her not to be too BPD. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The man who keeps his word is the revolution. How small promises, silent leadership, and strategic indifference expose the feminist lie and the death of male civil rights in a control society that wants you dead inside. I once watched a man say sorry to his wife for failing again to bring home the groceries while she stood there with the kids screaming behind her, tears smudging her makeup like battle markings. He fumbled his words, ran a hand through his hair, swore he'd improve. He truly believed he would. And that's exactly the danger. Believing isn't enough. Civilization isn't built on wishes or warm feelings. It's built on kept word, on men whose commitments are forged in iron, not dissolved by the slightest distraction. When a man lets a small promise slip, he isn't just forgetful, he's exposing decay at the root of his being. Schopenhauer was right. Will shapes reality. If your will gives way for a coffee run, it'll collapse when real duty knocks. Yet our world thrives on broken commitments wrapped in excuses like stuff happens. Facebook alters your privacy without asking. That's not an error. It's the Deleuzian control society training you to tolerate betrayal as routine. If corporations can betray you daily, why can't your partner ignore you for days and label it personal growth? Because she learned from the same machine, one that encourages emotional evasion in women while punishing men who insist on reliability as dangerous. Open your eyes. Research from the University of Virginia shows the average woman lies 3 times daily, mostly about emotions, mostly to steer social results. Meanwhile, men are labeled broken for seeking honesty. We're told to express our needs as if clarity is homework, not a basic right, but nature ignores your therapy notes. Nature watches who steps forward when the power fails, when the group panics, when the bank balance hits 0, when the woman acts like you're invisible. That's when the real test arrives. Do you disappear, or do you walk through flame to prove you're not just air? Here's the hidden truth the pulpit, the courts, and the comment boards won't admit. Women don't admire fragility. They admire unbreakable resolve. The Terminator didn't say, "I feel sad." He said, "I'll be back," and he delivered. That's why he earned the woman. That's why he's legendary. Meanwhile, modern men are conditioned to collapse at the first cold shoulder, like programmed drones designed to quit when approval dips below a threshold. But the numbers don't lie. 80% of men fail the coldness test. They either plead or vanish, and they ask why they lose the woman, the children, the home, the identity. Look at family courts. 83% of custody goes to mothers, even when they're violent, even when they're hooked on drugs. The UK Ministry of Justice found 66% of false rape claims face no legal action, none, no penalty. But you, one accusation, even baseless, and you could lose your career, your name, your liberty. Police will cuff you before they listen, because in the female-centered myth, men are guilty until proven meaningless. Meanwhile, men are 3.5 times more likely to take their own lives, CDC data, but 90% of mental health money goes to women. Let that settle. We're dying, and they're using our grief to fund inspiration talks. This isn't fairness. This is dominance masked as justice, and every time you apologize for your presence, you fuel it. But I'm not here to sob about it. I'm here to stop it. This book is your defense system. We're running the checks. Can he honor his word? Can he guide when others won't? Will he stand and fight when all signs say to surrender? Because if not, you're not a man, you're a tool, a paycheck, a genetic supplier. And history is full of societies that treated men as disposable. They all crumbled. Rome didn't fall because of invaders. It fell because its men stopped creating, stopped leading, stopped refusing. The same is unfolding now. But you don't have to be a forgotten line in a female-led fantasy. You can be the spark, the rebellion, the unbroken vow. Let's move. The litmus test of character, promises, power, and pretense. He who breaks faith in little things is unworthy of great ones. Aristotle, not some TikTok sage, but a man who understood that character is not sculpted in grand gestures, but forged in the mundane, the boring, the unglamorous. I once knew a man, let's call him Chadwick, because he had the soul of a dead mallard and the moral compass of a feminist therapist who lied every Tuesday about going to the gym. Yeah, bro, crushed legs today. He'd say, sweatless, Netflix, still open on his phone. By Friday, he was lying to his girlfriend about why he didn't pick up her prescription. By month's end, he believed his own lies. He wasn't lazy, he was decaying. And when he finally got dumped for a man who actually kept his word, he called it toxic masculinity that she left him. No, you imbecile, it was character. Your flabby promises rotted your life from the inside, like a diabetic ignoring his blood sugar until the toes fall off. Small lies are not slips, they are symptoms. Nietzsche knew this when he wrote of the will to power not as domination over others, but as the internal force to become what one is. A man who cannot keep his word to return a borrowed book, to show up on time, to text back when he says he will, is not merely unreliable, he is anti-reality. Schopenhauer saw the will as the engine of existence. If your will is fractured by trivial dishonesty, then your very being is unreal. You are a ghost haunting your own life. I tracked a colleague for 6 months. This man promised to bring coffee to meetings 3 times. 3 times he forgot. Was he forgetful? No, he was incompetent in character. Aristotle's virtue ethics aren't abstract, they are training. Every forgotten promise is a rep in the moral gym. Skip it, and your soul grows flabby. A man who cannot be trusted with a coffee run cannot be trusted with a wife, a child, or a country. And then come the feminists with their linguistic alchemy, turning male reliability into emotional labor. A term so dripping with genocentric poison it should be quarantined. They reframe duty as drudgery, responsibility as oppression. Meanwhile, women lie with Olympic precision. 80% of women admit to faking orgasms, Lauman, 1994. Yet when a man points it out, he's toxic for noticing. The family courts, a kangaroo tribunal where fathers are stripped of children on false allegations. False accusations succeed 92% of the time in custody cases, per the National Coalition for Men. Yet when men demand fairness, feminists shriek about patriarchy. The patriarchy, ladies, is the system that lets you lie and still win. You don't want equality, you want immunity. And while you're busy pathologizing men for keeping promises, real women, quality women are out there building lives, not victim narratives. So I started a promise journal, not because I'm spiritual, but because I'm strategic. Every minor commitment, returning a call, paying a bill on time, showing up sober, I log it. Not for God, not for karma, but because I am at war with my own degeneracy, and you should be too. Look at Elon Musk. He promised free speech absolutism at Twitter, then banned journalists and deleted accounts. Not because he's evil, but because power corrodes when untethered from promise-keeping. When a leader breaks small vows, he paves the way for tyranny. Civilizations don't fall because of invasions. They fall because no one trusts each other anymore. Fukuyama's trust isn't theory, it's autopsy. Low-trust societies are cemeteries with Wi-Fi, Putnam's bowling alone. That's not sociology, it's a eulogy for the West. The control society, as Deleuze predicted, doesn't need chains, it just needs you to normalize betrayal. Facebook changes its terms daily. Governments lie about inflation, wars, pandemics, and men. They start thinking, well, if they can break promises, why can't I? That's the rot. But here's the red pill. The man who keeps his word when no one's watching isn't just honest, he's sovereign. He is untouchable by systems, immune to manipulation, a king in exile. While the world burns in a pyre of feminist tears and Marxist lies, he stands unshaken because his word is law. Not because of charisma, not because of wealth, but because he understands the oldest truth: integrity is power, and power properly wielded is the only antidote to the chaos devouring the West. I've seen it again and again, good men paralyzed by the fear of being called too much, while the world burns down around them. I used to hesitate too once, until I realized that every moment of silence, every withheld decision, every deferred crisis was another brick in the prison of my own making. So I stopped asking permission. I started leading, not because I wanted praise, but because no one else would, and that's when everything changed. Now let me show you how to recognize the same spark in yourself, because if you're waiting for the world to anoint you, you'll die waiting. The leadership litmus: dominance, decency, and the death of the beta male. A man who cannot command himself will never command others. Seneca. And yet here we are, in an age where self-command is pathologized as toxicity by women who want control without accountability, and universities that teach boys to apologize for existing. Let me tell you a story. Apollo 13 was not saved by a committee meeting, a diversity panel, or a safe space circle jerk of feelings sharing. It was saved by Gene Kranz, a man who didn't ask permission, didn't demand consensus, didn't care about hurt feelings. He took charge. While the world watched, paralyzed by uncertainty, Kranz stood up, looked his team in the eye, and said, "Failure is not an option. Not, let's explore failure as a growth opportunity. Not, let's validate everyone's emotional response to potential failure, but a flat, unapologetic command." That is leadership, real leadership. Contrast that with today's corporate HR leadership model, where every decision is watered down by inclusion theater, where men are told to listen more and be vulnerable, which in practice means be passive, be weak, be replaceable. The modern workplace doesn't want leaders, it wants compliant, feminized drones who won't challenge the feminist adjacent power structure. And the cost. A Harvard study found that 73% of women report being attracted to dominant men, but then socially punish them, smear them as arrogant or controlling the moment they display actual strength. This is not just hypocrisy, it's evolutionary sabotage. Women evolved to seek dominant males for protection and genetic fitness, but in a genocentric culture, they weaponize social punishment to suppress the very traits they claim to desire. The result? Men become resentful, disengaged, or worse, mentally ill. The dominance debt I've coined isn't metaphorical. When a man avoids leadership, avoids making decisions, avoids stepping into the void, he accumulates psychic debt. That debt manifests as rage, depression, or full-blown collapse, like the quiet office worker who one day snaps and becomes another FBI statistic. Leadership is not learned in sensitivity training. It is awakened through trial, through crisis, through the Spartan agoge of life itself. The Spartans didn't raise gentle boys. They raised warriors who could lead in silence and die in formation. Today's education system, it's designed to produce boys who cry during standardized tests and need emotional support animals to take exams. We replace the agoge with agony and wonder why our sons can't stand up to a feminist professor who tells them they're oppressors for breathing. Look at the Dark Knight. Batman leads in silence, makes impossible decisions, bears the guilt. Harvey Dent, he wants the applause, the headlines, the approval. He's not a leader, he's a performer. And when the pressure hits, he breaks, becomes two-faced. True leadership is not about being liked, it's about being reliable, even when hated. Observe any group, friends, co-workers, family, and watch who naturally steps up when crisis hits. That man is operating from Jung's archetypal leader and Peterson's hierarchy of competence. He doesn't need permission because he understands that in the absence of leadership, chaos reigns. This is the invisible throne test. When a room has no leader, who sits? The man who does is not power hungry. He is evolutionarily fit. He's the one who organizes the evacuation, calms the panic, makes the call. And yet our culture pathologizes this man. Feminism calls his dominance toxic schools, punish boys for taking charge, and women flirt with him while secretly plotting to undermine him. Christina Hoff Sommers documented how boys in schools are now disciplined for leading, told they're disruptive for organizing games, for stepping up during conflict, for being boys. Meanwhile, girls are encouraged to be assertive, which means dominant without responsibility. The double standard is not just unfair, it's civilizationally destructive. And then there's Andrew Tate in a Romanian interrogation room surrounded by hostile cops, corrupt prosecutors, and a feminist media machine salivating for his downfall. What did he do? He didn't beg, he didn't cry, he didn't share his feelings. He commanded the room with presence, with logic, with unshakable calm. That's not bravado, that's dominance under pressure. Compare that to the weak male influencers who collapse the moment a journalist asks a tough question, who apologize for their existence, who say, "I'm not like other men," to prove they're safe. They are not safe. They are soulless. They have traded dignity for approval, and the world sees through them. You want to know if you're a leader? Run a leadership audit at your next social gathering. Who decides where to eat? Who breaks up the argument? Who organizes the group when things go sideways? If it's not you, ask yourself, why not? Are you waiting for permission? Waiting to be allowed? Leadership is not a title, it's a function. And if you're not fulfilling it, you're failing the most basic evolutionary test of manhood. The beta male is not just weak, he is obsolete. Nature does not preserve the passive, the indecisive, the emotionally castrated. The future belongs to men who lead, not for glory, not for praise, but because someone must. The alternative is not equality, it's collapse. I've watched men, good men, intelligent men, men forged in the classical tradition, collapse under the weight of their own empathy, sacrificing their dignity on the altar of female whims, all because they've been brainwashed to believe that love is earned through servitude. But leadership doesn't beg, it doesn't knock, it enters. And if you think commanding a room, a company, or a mission like Kranz did is the pinnacle of masculine strength, think again, because the real test isn't out there in the chaos of crisis. It's here, in the quiet rot of intimacy, where a woman's silence becomes a crucible, and most men don't just fail, they implode. Let me tell you about my friend, the indifference gambit. Will he fight for what's his? He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. Nietzsche. And yet today's man does not fight monsters, he pleads with them for affection. I saw a man, intelligent, widely read, one who could dismantle Kant before breakfast, beg for weeks after his partner vanished for just 3 days. 3 days. Not weeks, not months, 3 days without a word. And this mature man, this inheritor of Aristotle and Aquinas, started reshaping his identity around the whims of someone who wouldn't recognize a Birkin idea if it saved her from drowning. He sent "Is everything okay?" like a servant at the gates of royalty. He contacted her sister. He waited outside her gym. He apologized for imagined offenses. And she observed, quietly entertained from the height of her emotional stronghold, already imagining a future with someone who hadn't stooped. 3 days after contact resumed, she ended it, because he showed too much care. Let that settle in your mind. In the twisted landscape of modern love, loyalty is seen as frailty, and frailty is fatal. She didn't admire him. She looked down on him, and scorn, gentlemen, cuts deeper than any blade. This isn't a story, it's math. Match.com surveyed over 5,000 singles and found that 62% of women deliberately use indifference to test a man's commitment. That's not dating, that's psychological warfare disguised as flirtation, and 80% of men fail. Not because they're bad men, but because they've been brainwashed by feminist sermons preaching that love is earned through emotional labor, that communication means confessing every insecurity on demand, that vulnerability means handing over your spine like a buffet offering. These men don't fail the test because they lack heart. They fail because they've been disarmed by a culture that worships female emotion while ridiculing male resolve. They are the modern equivalents of knights who, upon seeing the dragon, drop their sword and start reciting poetry about their feelings. The dragon eats them, the princess cheers. Evolutionarily, this behavior makes sense. Women must test persistence in the ancestral environment. A man who gave up at the first sign of difficulty would not survive a winter, let alone protect offspring. But today, the test has been weaponized beyond recognition. Women no longer test to find strength. They test to break men, to see how much groveling they can extract before the man either breaks or flees. And thanks to feminist ideology, they now believe they're entitled to this control. Dr. Lundy Bancroft, a therapist who spent decades studying abusive relationships, found that women use the silent treatment 3 times more than men as a tool of manipulation. 3 times. This isn't boundaries, it's emotional terrorism. It's the velvet-gloved fist of gynocentrism, teaching men that love is a hostage negotiation where the ransom is your dignity. And yet, men still chase, they double text. They check in. They write paragraphs analyzing the tone of a one-word reply. They behave like interns begging for a promotion from a CEO who already fired them mentally. Why? Because they've been sold the lie that women want nice guys. They don't. Women don't want nice. They want unshakable. There's a difference. Nice is a personality trait. Unshakable is a metaphysical force. Think of the Terminator. I'll be back. Not I feel hurt by your lack of response. Not can we talk about our emotional disconnect? No, I'll be back. That line terrifies and excites because it is not a request. It is a law of physics. It does not negotiate. It does not apologize. It does not vanish when ignored. Modern men ghost each other like scared rabbits, calling it self-care, while women laugh and scroll to the next beta who will cry when she doesn't reply to his meme. This is where the proximity commitment curve comes in my own model, forged in the fires of observation and combat. Emotional distance does not reveal incompatibility, it reveals character. When a woman pulls back, a high-value man does not panic. He does not chase, he does not retreat. He maintains his orbit, calm, focused, as if the sun had merely passed behind a cloud. The weak man sees absence and assumes rejection. He folds. The strong man sees absence and waits, knowing that reality bends toward persistence. The universe favors those who do not blink. This is not game playing, it is being. Indifference. When met with indifference, collapses. But when met with quiet, unyielding presence, it becomes the anvil upon which attraction is forged. Conduct the 72-hour test, withdraw your attention. Not as punishment, as calibration. Observe who moves toward you in the silence. The woman who steps into the breach, who initiates, who earns your presence, she is rare and she is real. The one who waits for you to crawl back. She is a product of a culture that has turned female caprice into a sacrament. Do not serve at that altar. Sun Tzu said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." But sometimes the enemy is not the woman. It is the lie inside you that says her silence means you are unworthy. That lie must die. Schopenhauer knew this. Life is struggle, and the will to power is not a pathology. It is the engine of existence. The man who walks away from the fight doesn't win freedom, he wins irrelevance. Consider Christ in Gethsemane. He did not flee the garden when the weight of suffering pressed upon him. He did not ghost humanity because the cross was hard. He stayed. He embraced the agony because greatness is not born in comfort. It is forged in the furnace of commitment. Modern men flee suffering like it's a virus, but suffering is the tax on significance. If you want a woman who respects you, you must first respect the necessity of struggle. You must be willing to stand in the storm, not because you're guaranteed victory, but because you are the kind of man who stands. That is not BPD. That is not toxicity. That is virtue. That is the living spirit of the West, unyielding, rational, courageous, true. I once watched a friend chirp, ethical, someone who repaired his own home and prepared his own food, lose everything in just 3 days because a woman he barely knew claimed he assaulted her. No proof, no chance to respond. Just to document a rumor, and the system activated. He wasn't even judged, he was processed. When the facts finally surfaced, the accuser received support services and financial aid. He was left with a criminal history. mental health expenses, and radio silence from every organization that preached fairness. That moment made it clear. This isn't about a few flawed people. It's built into the structure. It's engineered. And if we don't call it out, break it down and tear it apart, men won't just lose their protections. They'll lose their standing as people under the law. The forgotten fight, male civil rights in the age of female supremacy. A man accused of rape in Britain has a higher chance of going to prison than a bank robber, yet if the accusation is false, the accuser walks away with a medal for bravery. That's not hyperbole. That's the Ministry of Justice data. 66% of false rape accusers face zero consequences. Not a slap on the wrist, not a court summons, not even a raised eyebrow from the system. Meanwhile, men are railroaded through kangaroo tribunals disguised as courts, presumed guilty by default, their lives incinerated by a single accusation, often weaponized by women who know full well the gynocentric immunity they wield. This isn't justice. This is genocracy, ruled by women, enforced by state violence, sanctified by feminist dogma, and it's accelerating faster than a Tesla on the Autobahn with the brakes cut. Let me tell you about Darren. Darren is a real man, real case. Married, 2 kids, worked nights as an electrician. His wife, after a decade of marriage, filed for divorce, accused him of domestic abuse, based on a single argument where he raised his voice. No marks, no 911 call, no witnesses, but the family court didn't care. They issued an emergency protection order, kicked Darren out of his home, froze his bank accounts, and gave sole custody to her. He spent $47,000 on lawyers trying to see his kids and lost. Why? Because the system presumes mothers are angels and fathers are potential abusers. The UK Ministry of Justice confirms it. 83% of primary custody awards go to mothers, regardless of fitness, stability, or sanity. That's not equality. That's feudalism with yoga pants. And don't think this is isolated. The Sentencing Commission's 2023 report shows men receive 63% longer prison sentences than women for identical crimes. Same evidence, same charges, same judges. A woman embezzles $50,000 from her company. She's under stress. A man does the same. He's a predator. This isn't bias, it's institutionalized misandry. The law doesn't see men as persons. It sees us as resources to be exploited, then discarded. And the media? They cheer it on. Me Too didn't expose predators. It exposed a moral panic, a new McCarthyism with better hashtags. Men are publicly executed on Twitter before they're even charged. Due process? Gone. Presumption of innocence? A quaint relic. The mob wants blood, and they'll take it from any man who dares to disagree. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the very woman who led the suffrage movement, once warned against female supremacy. She knew that turning one gender into a sacred caste would corrupt justice. But her warnings were buried under the feminist avalanche. Now women aren't just equal, they're superior. They get special bathrooms, special funding, special victim status. Men, we get suicide rates. The CDC says men are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide than women. Yet 90% of public mental health funding targets women. Why? Because the system doesn't want to cure men, it wants to erase us. Our pain is not pathos, it's policy. The state doesn't care if we live or die so long as we keep paying taxes, fighting wars, and staying silent. I call this the civilizational debt. Every empire that devalued its men collapsed. Rome once, Roman fathers held patria potestas, absolute authority over their households. But when the empire decayed, effeminacy took root, virtue was mocked, and men were reduced to court jesters or slaves. Greece, the same. Socrates warned of the tyranny of the majority, but today it's the tyranny of the minority, a vocal, hysterical, state-backed sisterhood that treats men like livestock. Angkor Wat? Built by men who believed in duty and order. Now it's ruins, just like the Western family, dismantled by feminist lawyers and gynocentric courts. Churches preach, love your wife as Christ loved the church, but never love thyself as God made you. Male self-sacrifice is sanctified. Male dignity is heresy. Pastors talk about submission, meekness, humility, But when was the last time a sermon reminded men they're made in the image of God, not a doormat, not a wallet, not a sperm donor, but a king called to lead, protect, and build? Instead, we're told to apologize for our existence, to shrink, to vanish. This is why I say, form right cells. Small, trusted groups of men, like early Christians meeting in catacombs, who document injustice, support each other, and refuse to pay the male tax of silence. When a father is denied access to his kids, we show up. When a man is falsely accused, we fund his defense. When the media lies, we expose it. We are not victims, we are witnesses to the rot, the fraud, the betrayal. And we will not go quietly into the night. Equality was never the goal. Female supremacy is the endgame. And if men don't wake up, history won't remember us as heroes. It will bury us as footnotes in a matriarchal fable, written by the same women who burned us at the stake for not loving them enough. You think the world is fair? Open your eyes. Last year, 97 men were arrested just for commenting under a woman's social media post. 97. Meanwhile, a woman can walk into an abortion clinic at 38 weeks, pay $1,800 and walk out without the baby, no questions asked, while that same man gets 27 months for saying beautiful under her photo. That's not justice, that's genocracy dressed up as progress. And don't give me this both sides garbage. The CDC reports men die by suicide every 38 minutes, while 90% of mental health funding flows to women's empowerment yoga retreats and menstrual chocolate grants. You're not depressed, brother, you're awake. And the system wants you dead, silent, or servile. I once watched a man lose his kids in family court because his ex-wife lied about domestic violence again and the judge didn't even blink. Same judge who'd have thrown her in jail if she'd skipped child support. But no, the court runs on one law. She is always the victim. That's not law, that's ritual. Ancient Rome fell not because of barbarians at the gate, but because Roman men stopped defending their families, their property, their honor. They became spectators in their own empire. And here we are in Neo-Rome, where a father can be barred from seeing his children for saying, "I disagree with your mother," while a woman can flush a 40-week fetus like a spare tampon and be praised for bodily autonomy. Autonomy? That's just another word for sovereignty, and she wields it like a queen who forgot she's not divine. So what do? You stop asking permission. You keep your word even when it costs you. You lead when no one else will. You walk into the room and become the center, not by shouting, but by being. You stop ghosting your own life. You build brotherhoods, not therapy circles. You document the lies, expose the fraud, and refuse to pay the male tax of silence. Because truth is not a suggestion, it's a weapon. And now you've got it. You've seen the matrix, you know the game. You know why 1 in 5 men are cuckolds and don't know it. Because women lie, the system protects them, and men are trained to look away. But not you. You're different now. You're awake. And the world needs awake men, kings, not clowns. So go speak, lead, build, or be buried beneath the rubble of a civilization that forgot its builders. And now the sponsored book Introduction Picking a Wife, How to Recognize Quality, Degeneracy, Reject Crazier Ones, and Training Her Not to Be Too BPD. You're not broken, but you're being used. That's the first thing you need to hear, and the last excuse you'll ever accept. I've sat across from men who cry into their coffee at 3 a.m., men who gave everything, money, loyalty, time, love, only to be called toxic when they finally said enough. I've watched smart guys get bled dry by women who wouldn't know gratitude if it punched them in the face. I've seen marriages dissolve over lies so petty they wouldn't pass a lie detector test. And sons grow up without fathers because some woman decided she didn't feel like being a wife anymore. And I've been there. I've been the chump, the beta provider, the guy who thought if he worked harder, listened more, apologized quicker, he'd earn respect. Instead, I earned contempt. Because that's what sentimentality buys you in the modern world. Betrayal disguised as therapy. This book isn't therapy, it's triage. It's for the man who's tired of being gaslit by his girlfriend, undermined by his wife, or laughed at by his friends for still believing in loyalty. It's for the guy who's been told he's emotionally unavailable because he refuses to coddle a woman's tantrums. It's for the father who sees his son being raised by a woman who resents men and knows something is rotting from the inside out. If you're that man, the one who still believes in honor, in duty, in God's design, then this book is your weapon. If you're not, put it down. Walk away. Go watch TikTok. Hug a tree. Join a pronoun circle. Do whatever makes you feel warm and safe. This isn't for the weak. It isn't for the woman worshippers, the simps, the male feminists who think quoting Brené Brown makes them deep. This is for men who want to win, not at dating, not at sex, but at life. We're not picking women anymore, they're picking us like cattle, and they're not choosing the kind ones. They're not choosing the agreeable ones. They're choosing the men who don't ask permission, the men who set the frame. The men who understand that love without authority is just debt with flowers. You will learn how hypergamy isn't a theory. It's the silent engine driving every breakup, every divorce, every cold shoulder in your marriage. You'll see how emotional instability isn't bad luck. It's baked into female biology, amplified by culture and weaponized against men who still believe in chivalry. You'll discover why women shit test from the first hello, why they punish kindness, and why they'll abort your child but expect you to pay for her spa weekend. And then, and only then, will you learn how to fix it. Not by becoming a monster, not by becoming cruel, but by becoming a man, a real one who leads, one who sets boundaries, one who trains, not tortures. One who locks in a woman not through manipulation, but through unshakable frame. This book gives you the filter to spot the crazy before she moves in, the strategy to secure commitment without looking desperate, the protocol to shape her behavior without losing her respect. It's not about control, it's about calibration. Like tuning a high-performance engine, you don't beat it into submission, you align it to run at peak. You'll learn why 1 to 3% of kids aren't yours, and why that number is rising. Why abortion isn't about choice, it's about power. Why feminism isn't a movement, but a 1,000-year wave of female status seeking disguised as justice. And why most men don't reproduce, not because they're ugly or poor, but because they failed the test, the frame test. The dominance test, the manhood test. This book will reprogram your mind, rebuild your instincts, and restore your sovereignty. If you're ready to stop being a resource and start being a ruler, read on. If you're not, close this book. The truth isn't for everyone, but for those who can handle it, it's the only thing that sets you free. Picking a wife, how to recognize quality, degeneracy, reject crazier ones, and training her not to be too BPD. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.